Hey, this is Dag, and you're listening to Beyond Trek Podcast.
On a red alert.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Beyond Trek Podcast. I'm your host, Dag. In the room with me, I have Suzanne and Renzo. We're going to talk to you about Strange New Worlds, Episode 9, almost to the end of that series, that season finale. The title of the episode is All Those Who Wander. There's some trivia about that at the end, but right now, Renzo is going to give you the episode summary right after the spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert.
So we start with Uhura giving us an opening log, revealing that she's completed her assignment on Enterprise and will be returning to Earth. She recounts her experiences rotating through the various departments on board and how amazing the people around her have been. She talks about how the other officers knew Starfleet was their life goal, while she is still searching for her own path. We find that she is attending another of the senior staff's casual banquets in Pike's quarters. The captain calls for everyone to celebrate cadets Chia and Uhura for completing their rotations on Enterprise. He extols their virtues and their strengths. Ensign Duke is called upon to accept promotion to lieutenant, as number one presents him with new sleeve cuffs and a badge. Ortegas approaches Uhura, calling her out for being a wallflower, and Uhura asks for permission to speak freely. Ortegas protests the protocol. Uhura persists, and Ortegas finally accepts it. Pike offers some additional words of support until he is called away by an announcement over the comms from Spock. A Priority 1 message from Starfleet demands senior staff attention. Pike calls for La'an to join them as he dismisses the banquet's gathering. With the senior staff assembled, we learn that the USS Peregrine, a Sombra-class ship, has gone off radar near Vallejo Beta 5. Starfleet wants them to offer aid, but there's a problem. The current mission to ferry precious Vidium power cells to Deep Space Station K7, and a detour would render the cells impotent, and K7 would suffer a complete power outage. A suggestion is offered. Drop shuttle off to investigate the missing Peregrine near Vallejo Beta 5, while Enterprise continues on course to deliver the power cells. Then comes the parameters of the mission. Vallejo Beta 5 is an L-class planet. The landing party would be in a communications dead zone. So, Pike volunteers to lead the mission and makes it a campy family road trip metaphor about getting the kids into the station wagon for one last hurrah, complete with a jab of, "Don't make me turn this car around," with pointed tongs. The shuttle disembarks Enterprise, with Pike ordering Una to continue, despite her wish to monitor their transit. Since the upper atmosphere blocks comms, there's no good reason. Having landed on the planet's surface, we can see that the Peregrine has landed on the planet, and in true Trek fashion, the landing party has had to land several kilometers from the ship. Spock lampshades this by mentioning geothermal anomalies that prevent them from flying any closer. He notes that there will be an ice storm soon. While Hemmer is elated by the freezing weather, Uhura is freezing. Spock asks if the anomalies are what's killing the communications, and Spock says no. If it's the planet's ionic interference. He accidentally calls Duke an ensign, unaware of his promotion, and Sam Kirk tells him that he owes Duke a drink for the mishap. Chapel confirms this, it's apparently tradition to buy a drink for someone you've misranked. Spock notes cynically that human drinking games seemingly have no limit on permutations. Pike inquires about the absence of life signs, to which Mbenga replies that there is still interference. They're interrupted by La'an, who says it might not be a scanning problem at all, and points to a bloody, dismembered arm on the ice in front of them. And now the credits roll. The score here is very reminiscent of horror thrillers, as the camera pans inside of the derelict Peregrine, complete with lights flickering and hatches wide open. The Enterprise landing party cautiously enters the downship. The area is blood-stained. Assessing the ship's power supply, Spock says that basically everything is offline, even the bridge. Someone had hardwired operations to function directly from engineering. When Pike asks why someone would do that, Hemmer responds. He notes that there is plasma in the main circuits, something that implies the surviving crew must have tapped into the warp core for direct power. To repair this, Uhura says that the ship's backup batteries and reactor chamber must have been busted. Pike commends the three of them for their forensic investigation and diagnosis, glad to have brought along the right people for the job. Hemmer plans to go to engineering to restore power everywhere else. La'an returns and reports that she's found 20 casualties, including the captain, on a ship that only had 99 people on it to begin with. They seem to have frozen to death, while their environment suits were shredded by the elements, and their remains were picked apart by local wildlife. Pike wants to review the ship's logs. Outside, commenting on the gritty weather conditions, Lieutenant Sam Kirk is called to review a finding. A clutch of body parts arranged in a grisly pattern in a blood-soaked area. Reviewing the logs, the captain of the Peregrine reports that they picked up 3 people on an M-class planet: a human, an unknown alien, and an Orion, who they later learned was infected with Gorn eggs. The Orion knew this and set off an explosion that triggered the beacon that was intercepted by Starfleet. He triggered his detonation inside of engineering. And that's when Starfleet receives this message and launches the repair mission in the first place. The captain's log continues to state that if she had known when they still had comms, she would have warned anyone else to stay away from the planet. Scanners sense the presence of a human and an unknown alien. Pike takes Uhura and La'an to investigate. Armed, they find more bodies and encounter an alien unlike anything that we've seen before on Star Trek. Blue-skinned, covered with heavy robes, and with crests above its head that evoke ladybug-like wings. It speaks aggressively, holding a weapon of its own, but the translators aren't working. La'an asks Uhura to do a linguistics thing, to which Uhura responds, "That's not how linguistics works." The alien repeats itself, brandishing its pike-like weapon further. Uhura deduces that it might be protecting the other life form, the human, and asks Pike to lower the weapons as a symbol of trust. Putting her hands up, the alien hesitantly leads them to the human, a disheveled young girl. Spock asks Chapel for some medical equipment needed by Lieutenant Duke. They discuss the advantages of pride versus logic, and Chapel surmises that Spock is probably a tempest when he is angry. Spock says, while that is true, the teachings of Serac allow him to control those feelings. Chapel says that it's okay to get mad sometimes. Uhura says that he's going to miss Hemmer, and Hemmer asks if that means she'll be leaving Starfleet. Uhura says that she feels like she's been coasting along her life path, but she's overcome her fear of facing her future alone. Hammer suggests her fear isn't being alone, but putting down roots. He says he understands that it's easier to leave than to be the one who gets left behind. He tells her that this is wrong, though, and that the ease with which she makes friends is a gift, and that being hurt by others is inevitable. But overcoming it, and appreciating the love it engenders, will far outweigh the sorrow. Back in the debris of the Peregrine sickbay, Dr. Mbenga is wrapping up his scan of the little girl and the alien. The girl asks if they're going to be leaving soon. La'an reminds him to check them thoroughly, and Mbenga reports that there are no anomalies. La'an turns to interrogating the little girl and the alien, called Buckley by the child, and protests. The girl calms him and tells La'an that the monsters are gone. La'an continues questioning, and Mbenga interjects, telling her to stop harassing his daughter, and then corrects himself, his patient. La'an reports to Pike that the Peregrine must have picked up their guests as survivors from a Gorn breeding colony, and Mbenga acknowledges his mistake to La'an, but implores her to be receptive to the girl's needs instead of badgering her with questions. The girl is traumatized and is in a place where she has to be nurtured to overcome. Spock is investigating further and finds a blood trail that leads to the air ducts. Pike's appearance seems to surprise him, and Mbenga quips that he didn't realize Spock was so jumpy. Buckley's experiencing very labored breathing, and Chapel finds a gooey wound on his wrist that shows glowing red veins under the skin. They're on his neck, too. Chapel asks Shia to recalibrate for a physical and steps away. The girl, Oriana, sees Buckley's symptoms like she knows what's coming. She leaves the area, lies on a biobed, covers her mouth, and hides. Shia asks if things are okay when Buckley clutches his chest, and then a Gorn bursts out of his back. It leaps to her and slashes her throat. Buckley falls over, dead or dying. Chapel runs over in time to see 2 more Gorn burst out of Buckley, one immediately devouring the other. She doesn't have time to help. One of the Gorn comes after her. She jumps on a biobed and activates the force field. Duke and Mbenga are helping to complete needed repairs when a Gorn infant leaps from the Jeffries tube and attacks Duke, dragging his body away, screaming. Spock fires multiple shots at the Gorn, but fails to stop. In sickbay, Chapel emerges from the force field calling for the little girl, but she's nowhere to be found. A door opens, spooking her, but it's La'an who quickly determines a total of 4 Gorn hatchlings with 1 dead. They'll mature quickly and fight for dominance, she says. The Gorn aren't showing up on sensors, which is going to make this mission harder to survive. Chapel is given a phaser with the advice to watch the ceilings and shoot anything that moves. Together, they go in search of the little girl. Advancing to the coldest part of the ship, they find her in the same place La'an might have hidden. Oriana says that the other ship's crew tricked the Gorn into leaving, but now that they're back, leaving means death. La'an has a flash of her brother telling her to run and takes the opportunity to heed Mbenga's advice, giving the girl strength not just to survive, but to live. Team Hemura strikes again, having safely restored power, As Uhura reboots the power, a deep growl fills engineering, and Hemmer notes he can smell human blood. On the bridge, power is restored. Sam Kirk is distressed over Duke's death. Internal comms come online, and Pike gives everyone an order to watch their backs and head to sickbay. In engineering, an adolescent Gorn appears and spits on Hemmer before being chased away by a shot from La'an. In sickbay, Mbenga determines the Gorn have genetic resilience to sensors. Also, that the Gorn maturity cycle depends on the host, ranging from weeks to days. Hemmer and Uhura get to medbay, and Pike asks if Hemmer can appeal to the Gorn telepathically. Hemmer says that they seem to have a telepathic blocking as well. Spock notes that as impressive, which sets Sam Kirk off on a string of insults, calling Spock insensitive. La'an lays out their strategy. The Gorn are going to vie for dominance amongst themselves and are attracted to violence. To hunt them, they'll need to use each other as bait in conjunction with the environmental systems, making it colder to bottleneck them. Pike returns to the bridge to quarterback the operations on cooling the ship. In engineering, Spock and Hemmer acknowledge that the Gorn will be drawn to that part of the ship as it cools. Hemmer notes that he will not be the one to kill it, but he will do what he must to protect the lives of his crew. Uhura is the first bait. Outrunning a Gorn adolescent to the transporter room, as it gets blasted with coolant in the transporter room, it goes into the vent systems. Spock is in position to shoot. The Gorn doesn't seem to fall for the bait. He succumbs to rage in his mind, screaming. He goes rather violent at the vent systems. A second Gorn runs around the side to try and box Spock in, but Sam Kirk stops him from getting bitten at the last second. Spock has to calm down to avoid hitting Sam. La'an is next up, commenting that when Spock is finished, there will only be one Gorn left. She warns Hemmer that she is coming his way and draws it out by surrendering her phaser. The Gorn is provoked and chases her to engineering, where she jumps into a ready-to-cargo container, screaming for Hemmer to do it. Hemmer unleashes a flare of supercooled gas upon the creature. It shrieks, writhes, and then vanishes from La'an's sight. Moments later, La'an opens the frozen container to peer cautiously out. She sees the Gorn frozen solid, and in a rage, she shatters it. Hemmer emerges from his container, suffering more notably than before. Kirk proclaims that they did it. They killed the last of them. La'an counters, not quite, and looks at Hemmer. Hemmer says he's going to go outside now, and Pike asks for clarification. Hemmer says he can't sense them, but he knows his own body very well. La'an declares that the spray is how they breed. While the crew says that they'll find a way to help him, he says they're just as in time. His sacrifice will save the people he cares most about. Spock says this is logical. Hemmer gives him the Vulcan creed to Spock, and Uhura protests in tears. Hemmer gives her a last piece of advice. Make a home for yourself amongst others, and you'll find joy. Uhura begs him to reconsider. He tells him not to weep for him, that he's had a good life, and adds in a whisper, "It's time for me to go." Starfleet fanfare kicks up, and a somber crescendo as Hemmer leaves the protection of the shuttle bay. He relishes the chilling breeze of the world before turning to face his friends one last time, before diving into the depths below. Out in space, Enterprise is towing the wreck of the Peregrine. Ortegas reveals how much she hates funerals. She says if Hemmer was there, he'd remind them that it's a celebration, to exalt the fallen and commit their memory to the cosmos. Then he'd chastise her for pushing the engines too hard. She'd call him a blue meanie, and they'd laugh. And it wouldn't have felt like a funeral. He was the best engineer she's ever served with. Uhura says that she never told Hemmer he reminded her of her father to see things from a new perspective, to do better and to be better, and that losing Hemmer hurts. She recalls his words, "The people you love can cause you the most pain, but it's the people you love who help fix what is broken the most." And that was Hemmer's purpose, to fix what was broken. She has seemingly found her purpose renewed in his sacrifice. Chapel notes that Spock is agitated and clenching his fists. He leaves a little prematurely, and she follows him, seeing him violently punch the wall. He tells her not to follow him, but she does so anyways. And as she reaches for him, he grabs her arm and turns to face her. He tells her he can't control what he has freed and scolds himself for his lack of control. She reasserts that dealing with these feelings makes him human and gives him what no Vulcan would in the same situation. A hug. He returns the gesture, albeit briefly, and that walks away. La'an says that she's already found a lead on Oriana's family. It's outside Federation space, and she requests the leave to follow up on it. She makes it clear to Pike that she's going to do this with or without his blessing. Pike says he'll square it with Starfleet, but she has to promise to come back. As she leaves, she thanks Chris for everything, Pike takes another sip from his whiskey glass, and the scene ends. On the bridge, Uhura glances around until her eyes fall upon the communication station. With another fanfare crescendo and the sounds of the bridge around her, she smiles as if to accept what we already know to be her destiny. Finn. Okay, so, hell of an episode, for sure.
So much happened.
So much.
They broke the team into like 3 or 4 different groups in this, and it was, the summary had to reflect everything that was happening everywhere. But yeah, this was a really busy episode. I'm blue. Dabba dee dabba die.
Yeah, same.
I'm with you. I thought it was very sad to kill off Hemmer too.
Rip Hemmer.
Yeah.
I'm upset that y'all were right.
I'm I think that was just like one of my beefs is like, why did we have to lose Hemmer for 4 episodes only to have him like annihilate the scenery in the last episode as Caster, and then
The wizard.
Yeah, and then have to die in this episode. Like, not cool, man.
Yeah.
Not cool.
And I know a lot of disability advocates are upset about it as well, and for in some ways for good reason. I feel like there've been a few characters in the show where it's just like, why do we need to do that?
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that we're gonna get. I mean, I know we're gonna get Bruce Horak back, because either he mentioned it or someone else mentioned it in an interview. But so that's good, but I'm still
Really?
pissed. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he says he's not done with Star
Not
Trek.
done.
Nope.
Yeah.
Maybe. What is it? Maybe Hemmer was like a Olympic level diver, and
I love that,
and he
actually.
totally survived.
No, I mean there were a few fan theories that was like, it was the Gorn hate the cold, so like what if he dove and somehow lived and then the Gorn babies died? I'm like, well, yeah, I guess.
This
But
is some
they still
Mace
have to
Windu
jump out of
survived
him.
bullshit to me. I
Mace
think the
Windu
point,
survived. He's coming back. You know Disney's gonna do it.
the point
God,
of the
that'd be so
sacrifice, the point of the story is that the sacrifice is worth it, right? Like if he somehow survives this, that really cheapens the episode.
I agree.
It
Yeah.
does. It really does. And I mean, that could be said of any sacrificial moment in all of, fiction.
Except Shax. I like the fact that Shax came back.
Well,
That was awesome.
Lower
Listen,
Decks is supposed to poke fun at those things, but
No rules, baby.
Yeah, I did have some thoughts on there. Like, it was nice to see Sam Kirk back in action again, and I was especially tickled to see sort of a reflection between him and his Kelvinverse brother, both attacking Spock for being an emotionless robot.
Yeah, that was good.
It felt
think
true too. It felt
Yeah.
very honest to the character, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the more we get of Sam Kirk, the more I'm like, this is Guy Fleetman from Galaxy Quest. This is crewman number 6. Just with the whole like, just the attitude of like, is there air? You don't know. Like, that's Sam Kirk to me, and I love that, and I'm thrilled that we get more of him. He's like the clearest definition of himbo I've seen in Star Trek in a while. And I
don't know.
love
I've seen
him.
some arguments for Pike and Riker both being like the epic himbos of Trek.
That's true, but they're not dumb enough. Like they're not like endearingly dumb enough. I feel like Sam Kirk fits that bill.
Speaking
Sam
of
Kirk.
dumb, on an away mission to a planet that is inhospitable, where something mysterious has happened, Captain Pike decides to A, go himself, B, take cadets, and C, take a guy who just got promoted.
That's a good point.
Those are some real bad choices.
Well, no, and that's the thing. It's like, yeah, he just got promoted, and you're about to take him on an away mission to an unknown planet with a big ship. He's gonna die, you idiot. Like, that's just how that works.
Yeah.
That has to be like bad juju in Starfleet. Like, that has to be like, don't go on any dangerous away missions when you just get promoted. Like, that has to be in the fucking handbook.
Well, somebody pointed out to me that like maybe Pike, because he knows his own fate, is doing this to try and like give plot armor to the people around him. But
That seems silly.
I mean, is it meta for him to take the mission, or is it more meta for him to not take the mission and do something like, well, you know how these missions go, they always start out great, but then shit goes down.
Yeah,
It would be way more meta for that to be a thing. But I really strongly feel like anytime they come across a clutch of bloodied bodies anywhere, it's got to be the Gorn. Every single time. They've got to be like, Gorn, 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 Gorn. Everybody put on your spray-proof suit. Gorn, 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 Gorn.
Spray-proof suit. Yeah, but yeah, that's another thing. It's just like, wouldn't the EV suits help? I guess not, because
They weren't even wearing EV suits. They just had like adventure gear on.
Yeah, just vibing.
They're
just
like
vibes.
They're like, it's an L-class planet, and the atmosphere is like low oxygen, and everybody's just chilling, literally.
Yeah.
And
Pike's like a dad on a camping trip. Like, all right, guys,
Okay.
we're roughing it.
Let's go back to Pike on a camping trip, right? The scene with the breakfast or brunch, whichever it ended up being, is
Yeah.
one of my favorites in recent Trek of anything. Just the whole like, try the waffles. No, taste the bacon. Oh shit, this is delicious. It's such a good back and forth. Like that whole scene is delightful. And I think that it really shows us that we need a Pike's cookbook immediately.
I
If they don't
really
produce
dig.
that, I'm gonna be mad.
Yeah. I really dig the family orientation of this sort of crew aspect. Like we didn't really get this early on, I think, any of the series, really. You had the captain who was dining with Trip and T'Pol, and that was just like the three of them. In TOS, you had the triumvirate, Kirk, Spock, McCoy. In TNG, you had the poker game, but that wasn't even like an established thing. We've already had like, I think there's been as many scenes of just like casual hangouts in Pike's quarters as there were poker games in the entire series run of TNG. DS9 didn't do a lot of family-oriented stuff, even though they still take the cake for the best comedic episodes. And even Voyager, like, I don't remember any kind of like, we're a family, let's dine together kind of anything there at all.
There were a few moments in Voyager, but not nearly as many.
Right.
I feel like there's an episode where they like all go to the, I think it's the 37s, maybe something like that, and it's the one where like they could choose to stay on the planet and just grow with whatever people they meet, and most of them don't, if any. I think all of them don't, and so that's the only family thing I ever got from Voyager, except for maybe the finale. So yeah, that tracks. This is the first time
I'm
I've
with
seen
you,
a lot
Dag.
of it.
I really like how close-knit and how familial this crew feels. Granted, the only people who we know are newcomers to this team were La'an and Uhura, right? And the rest of them all seem to have had some prior relationship, right? So that helps. Like, they've got 2-3 years of backstory we just don't get to see. Cool. Or more. So that helps with some of the familial stuff, but I really do think it just boils down to Captain Pike as a person being like a relationship builder in this fashion. He wants to cook for people. Oh, you did something great. Have some bacon. Snap my tongs at you. That kind of thing. It's just such dad vibe energy, and I love it.
Yeah.
And the apron was like, hey, Spock, you.
Yeah, go wash
that.
dishes.
I love that. It was so just very like, here's your apron, good sir. You do that now.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Let's talk about La'an for a minute. La'an came aboard as a replacement XO in episode 1 and stayed aboard as chief of security at Pike's request, and has shown a proclivity towards a very business-like manner at all times, except for that one episode where she and Una get to traipse about doing Enterprise bingo, which is glorious. You don't see a lot of opportunity for her to not even just like let her guard down a little bit, but to empathize with other characters. In fact, I think they did a really good job showing that she doesn't empathize. When Uhura's doing her tour through security, she's like, you just violated rule number X. And that theme proceeds through that episode. And I like that we were given these opportunities to just have La'an's arc highlight through these episodes until we get here when Mbenga's like, hey, this kid is in a moment where she can be a tragic character for the rest of her life, or she can heal, and you're in a very unique place to be able to relate to this kid. And at the end of the episode, she takes that to 1,000 and is like, I'm leaving the ship until I find this kid's family, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. it gives the character a heart, and like it's almost like she needed Mabenga's permission. Like, you're allowed to have a heart, kid. It's cool.
I honestly think some of it's part of this chip on her shoulder, right? Like, she went through trauma, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this episode, she finally gets a chance to deal some of that back. I'm not saying it's the healthiest way to approach trauma and getting over trauma, but at least it's her way, and it seems to help her. She smashes the shit out of that frozen little Gorn, and she seems to feel better for doing so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it feels very Seven-ish, and I mean that in the way of, like, she goes and helps people in the most aggressive way possible so that she can try and heal some of the shit she's been through. Again, not super healthy, as we've learned with Seven and the Rangers and, you know, Jazel and whatnot. But to me, it reads that way. I think that's why I like La'an so much, is that she just has this sort of, like, she does have a heart, but she's not going to wear it on her sleeve at all. And it's, you know, until now, in which case she's like, I'm leaving and I'm not coming back until I find them. And Pike's like, all right, sure.
Just come back.
Come back, please, but sure.
Yeah. I think that La'an, the way La'an is dealt with, you know, her trauma in this episode was very Klingon therapist. A Klingon therapist would be like, this is what's holding you back. Here's a backleth. Go kill it.
I think La'an and Worf would have been the greatest of
Oh,
friends.
man.
Oh, the best.
Oh,
yes,
man. La'an would
absolutely.
immediately be inducted into the House of Martok. It'd be perfect.
Oh, beautiful.
So there's a couple connections I wanted to bring up. One is just a point of praise, right? So Buckley the alien, even though, like, in our little summary there, he's an alien we've never seen in Trek, his description, and the description of some of his technology, does really closely fit something we know from Beta Canon. So in the Stargazer novels, which are about, like, Picard's time commanding the Stargazer, they meet a race called the Ubarak, Ubbarrak. They're like a minor power. They kind of like stop Federation expansion in that direction, sort of thing. They're described as being blue or purple skinned, large, hunched over humanoids with opening areas in their head that display emotion as they communicate. Right? It's not quite Buckley, but it's pretty fucking close. But the thing that sold it for me was when they fire on Stargazer, when they get engaged in firefights, their weapons are described as looking like contained balls or contained shots of lightning, which is exactly what Buckley's little staff shot when Spock was using it to hunt down the Gornling. So
Really?
I'm pretty on board with that guy being like an Ubarak that we're seeing in canon.
That's way cool, and it always astounds me how you draw these connections from Beta Canon so quickly, with all the thousands of species that have been introduced in those books. It's just it's encyclopedic. Props to you.
I try. But yeah, it's actually cool that we see that. What was the other thing? Oh, the other thing I think is really interesting is this is just like a bigger thing about the Gorn and Strange New Worlds. So I'm rewatching Discovery Season 2, and there's this scene where Leland gets introduced, and Pike and him talk. And Pike says a quick line about, like, I thought you were still up to your ass in alligators on Cestus 3.
Right.
Okay, so alligators on any other planet maybe
Obviously,
are just some other thing.
yeah.
But if he's talking about Cestus 3, it's got to be a reference to the Gorn.
Right.
Right?
From
So-
Arena.
Right. So I don't understand why everybody on this show is like, we've never really seen the Gorn. We don't know enough about the Gorn. But then, how are you fighting the Gorn on Cestus 3? It just is a little contradictory.
So you could, I mean, I could try to guess. I mean, like, up to your ass in alligators is very clearly I think we would even call that almost
A taunt.
an insult. You know,
Yeah.
maybe a racial insult against the Gorn. But at this point, we don't know anything about the Gorn. And having, you know, sporadic reports talk about, you know, lizard-like entities with lack of a better medical thing. You know, they eat everything, they're relentless. It sounds like an alligator. And not knowing any better, that could be where that comes from. But it's almost a slur by the time you get to, you know, TOS Arena to call a Gorn an alligator. But yeah, no, there's also like a Gorn statue in Lorca's office.
No, it's a skeleton.
That's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a Gorn skeleton. You know, going back to Hemmer, like I did mention, like, we lost him for 4 episodes, and then he comes back to just murder it in the last episode of the Kingdom of Elysian, or the Elysian Kingdom. And then here he just gets spit on and dies, and like
literally just
I'm upset, but it's not the worst first season cast member death we've had, because you remember Tasha Yar got slapped by a science experiment from ExxonMobil and didn't even get fancy parting words.
Sorry, that got me. That's good.
That's pretty good. No, I mean, I'm with you. We've had lots of like disappointing character deaths in Trek. I still think Jadzia Dax's death is super disappointing, right? Like,
that shit makes me want to
place.
fist fight
Man.
Rick Berman. And
Dude.
I'll say it. I mean it. Come on. Because like when you know why, I know this isn't the DS9 podcast, but like when you know why that happened, it's
You know, I'm just gonna share it with the audience because it bugs me and I should write it
pisses
down.
me off.
But my rewrite for Jadzia Dax's death is, as soon as she turns around and Dukat beams aboard, the orb that's behind her produces a prophet that sucks out the paw wraith in Dukat, and the paw wraith and the prophet do battle while Jadzia and Dukat have an actual physical fight, and Jadzia, having fought with Klingons, is beating the literal shit out of Dukat. He's just getting the floor wiped with him. Like, she'll pick him up by his ankle and just like slam him around like Hulk did with Loki or whatever.
Yeah.
Like
and
cartoonish.
then the slap shot is that the paw wraith overcomes the prophet, repossesses Dukat, and then does the flamey body thing. But I mean, like, that would have been better, because then Dukat's got like a fractured orbital, maybe a few scars that he carries with him for the rest of the fucking show, so that every time you look at his face, you can be like, Dax did that, motherfucker.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean, like my rewrite of Dax's death would be she's fine, she's alive. But I love Ezri, I really do. I grew to love Ezri, but like, fuck that.
Yeah.
It's just, it makes me want to fist fight anybody involved and just like go back and like, if I can go back in time, just go back in time, find Rick Berman.
I like
man.
Ezri.
Come on.
I think Ezri was a good addition to the cast, and having somebody to actually like help people with like counseling in the middle of a war, perfectly logical for me, right?
Absolutely.
But the best thing that came from Jadzia Dax's death was the character development for Worf. I think it helped him grow a lot. I really liked those stories for him.
Yeah.
Tragic though they may be, but yeah, I think that they did her dirty. But going back to this episode, one thing I wanted to point out is on the Gorn side of things with regards to spitting on Hemmer, the idea of like spitting as your means of reproduction and it like infects you and you get like the festering sores that
It's sick.
spread is real gross. It's real fucking gross.
It's grody. I
Yeah.
love it.
It's great.
It almost makes me hyper paranoid as somebody who's married to somebody who's like parasitophobic. Like, just the fact that
Ooh,
this
yeah.
little lizard can like spit on you and then suddenly you're infected with its progeny. It's no.
So
Not
fun
a good
fact
episode
you,
for OCD people.
all the Gorn
Really
in this
not a good
episode
episode.
were not added in CGI. The Gorn were done practical. The little white Gorn that burst out of people's chests or backs, practical. The adolescent Gorn and the spit, practical. The spit was practical. Bruce Horak had like buckets of spit thrown at him during multiple takes to get that scene right.
Must felt like Nickelodeon in that bit.
Yeah.
The green slime
Wow,
flying
what a
everywhere.
freaking reference, man.
Ha, ha, ha.
You can't do that on television.
But yeah, so I think that they really definitely hit on some like good classic sci-fi tropes, particularly those of Alien, right? Like the xenomorphs,
no,
the
this
chest
was-
bursters, all that.
This was absolutely LV-426 in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and the way that the young Gorn could see with like predator vision, like electral sensing, that was really cool.
So I noted that the vision for the young Gorn also had hexagonal moments in there to sort of indicate like a hexagonal thing, which reflects the
Adult Gorn.
the adult Gorn eyes. And almost some would even call like an elder Gorn. If you remember Slar from the Enterprise show, you could say that Slar was an adult, and then the Gorn that Kirk fought was an elder.
Yeah, I'm down with that. I don't have any objections to the whole like growth rate on these dudes, nothing. Like all that we can hand wave as crazy biology, right? The thing that I do find a little bit strange is that their medical sensors were having trouble finding them inside of bodies.
Yeah.
It's so dumb. I don't like that at all.
That was part of my beef. Like, the medical sensors would be like, I can't detect anything. Be like, can you detect a freaking cavity where there shouldn't be? And what's in that cavity?
Yeah.
You know, if these things are parasites, they obviously have some kind of umbilical sac that's tapped into arteries, because you don't get mass from nothing. You have to be able to, like, shred that mass somewhere.
I mean, surely you'd be able to just, like, look at it. Like, if they took a scan or whatever, like, surely at this point in history, you can look at that and go, like, oh, that's a weird green blob over there. Maybe that's a Gorn. Like, there's nothing, it just doesn't make sense to me. But I will say that, like, my only thing with that would be, like, maybe they were eggs for a very long time, especially when they were scanning them. Maybe they're small, whatever. Because they're small little things. So, like, I guess. But I still don't like it. Also, I had my first beef. I kind of, maybe this is controversial, I kind of don't like the Xenomorph Gorn. I kind of don't like it. It's not that I don't, because it does have its moments, and I think that they take something that has kind of already been done, and I can see why people are upset about it, and it kind of gives me that vibe, but they managed to make it Trek. Like, it's not just the same exact thing that we saw in, like, Alien. But it's been done before, you know, scary aliens find, you know, that burst out of people, I guess. And I get, that's my biggest thing. It's just like, I don't know, I guess we're going here with this now. Cool. But it does cement, like, the fear that La'an has of them, because I don't think that we knew that. I guess I assumed that they were just sort of mean. I guess, I don't know. But, like, the whole Xenomorph Gorn thing kind of threw me off a little bit, but they're scary as fuck and it kind of works, and I'm mad that it works.
Yeah, I strongly feel like the writers are trying to make the Gorn terrifying to really vindicate Arena, because in Arena you've got this slowpoke in a 40-pound suit who's burning up in Mojave, getting rocks and stuff thrown at him, and that's about
Styrofoam rocks.
And then of course Kirk has the know-how to manufacture a bazooka out of the local, you know, stuff, which just, you know, that totally just is like, that's beyond genius level intellect right there. That's like, you have to be able to make all that. What a hell of an apothecary. He should have gone into medicine. But all
right, go find some long, strong grass.
Like,
just some reeds.
My frustration is, like, I don't know if the Gorn can be vindicated now. If the writers were trying to make Arena better or something, I feel like they've gone a little too far. They're these insidious little parasites that destroy everything. Their young feed on each other, and somehow the species thrives to become a spacefaring race with these devastating vessels. And I just don't know how we get to Arena from here.
So I've got an even bigger question for you. How do we get from here to there being Gorn food vendors on Starbase 25 in lower decks? How do we get a Gorn wedding that, you know, Rutherford kind of gets in trouble at too, right? Like, there's definitely some changes that happen with the Gorn, and I have some theories about this, because I was wondering the same thing, like, since the episode aired, right? So we know that the Gorn, when they're implanted in something, do take some of the genetic material because they have different gestation rates while they're inside, right? So maybe what they've been feeding on in the past, or what they've been using for reproduction in the past, wasn't particularly a social creature, but now that they're using more social creatures, more social genetics get introduced into their bloodlines, and as a result they end up just becoming a more social race as a result.
Could be. It could be. I mean, there's
That's kind of Borgy, but I'm down with it.
There's a lot of beta canon that suggests that the Gorn have an extremely, not just multiple races, but also have embraced a lot of genetic engineering in their species and their castes and stuff like that. So I'm interested to know more about them, but I also appreciate that the writers are giving us the Enterprise crew's perspective, which is they're terrifying.
That's fair.
For now.
But again, we also haven't seen an adult Gorn yet, right? Like, we know that the starship that hunted them was probably crewed by adults, and they were sentient, sapient, and pretty damn terrifyingly scary.
Yep.
But they weren't necessarily, like, killing, feeding, biting people machines, right? So if they're more like Slar from Enterprise, then they probably can be reasoned with. They just have to want to be reasonable. The young Gorn, they can probably be written off as, like, have you ever tried to negotiate with a teenager? Come on, same thing, right? Except these are going to eat you. So
Yeah, I mean, if it obviously like adult Gorn and elder Gorn probably have some kind of savage reactions to keep the children in check, because the children are attracted to violence, but they also have a dominant like fight vying for dominance. So there is a way for these elders, obviously, to maintain their dominance over these little biters.
You do really want to know, though, about how Kelvin McCoy managed to do a C-section on a pregnant Gorn, even though he's right that those little suckers bite.
My headcanon is that he's exaggerating, and he either cut one, or he just labeled whatever his patient was a Gorn, and he was infested with parasites that he had to cut out.
Gotcha. I mean, that kind of fits. It's a little morbid, but it fits.
Yeah, but I mean, we're talking about a guy who injected a dead Tribble with augment blood just to see what would happen.
I love him.
He's the epitome of hold my beer, Jim. I've got to do something.
Oh no, I love that that's like genuinely one of my favorite Trek people. Just a little freak, just a freak with medical knowledge that decides to just fuck it, Tribble blood. Let's go. I love him.
The only other thing I've got to bring up for the episode was just that I think that the USS Peregrine being a reuse of all the Enterprise sets was really good. They changed the color from like the Enterprise's like oranges and golds to like blues for the Peregrine.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, works for me. Pretty sweet. I think that the reuse of the ship design is pretty good. There are some subtle changes, like the location of that like where Hemmer jumped doesn't exist on the Enterprise's model, but still, overall, makes sense. Kit bashing is a tradition in Starfleet and Star Trek going back 60 years, so I'm down.
Well, and also in TOS, the other ships that we see are Constitution classes. So it just kind of made sense to be like, hey, here's another Constitution class.
Constitution-ish. This was a
you're
somber class.
right.
They're faster, smaller crew.
Well,
but yeah, I get your point.
And there are at least two superficial differences between the Somber class and the Constitution. The Somber class has a larger window in the front of its bridge unit, and the stripes that run along the side on the Somber class are blue and not red, as they are in the Enterprise.
I would wager that the ship was supposed to just be like same design as the Constitution, but just shrunk down smaller. But I don't think that the scene at the end of the episode really reflects that very well. They look about the same size.
They do.
But because of the window in the bridge, it's supposed to be smaller, which works for me.
Perhaps. I had thoughts on Pike, just the way that he personifies and inspires like family in this show. It just makes me feel like, Jeffrey Hunter never got to see his Pike on air. You know that, right? Like, The Cage never aired on television in Jeffrey Hunter's lifetime, and the poor man, passed away in 1969. So he never got to see his vision of Pike. We got 2 movies with Pike in the JJ universe, but we never got to see Prime Pike again. And it's almost like we waited 60 years for the role to ripen for Anson Mount to step into the shoes. Uhura's first arc has now been settled. Her frustrations about whether or not she wanted to stay in Starfleet has been resolved. We now know that she's going to live on and be the linguistic savant who will carry the survival of the Enterprise on her back for the next 34 years in universe.
Speaking of linguistic savants, though, in my rewatch of season 2 of Disco, Saru speaks like 97 languages, so he's basically double an Uhura, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
He's an outlier. Saru is an outlier. He's too cool.
Yeah, but it does show how Starfleet kind of respects people's choices, because even though it would be tactically sound to shoehorn Saru into a communications role, he maintains his command division, which helps diplomatically anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Spock and Christine are really getting their start early to get that payoff in TOS, where there was that sort of just unspoken vibe, and then multiple kind of like obvious vibes. But I was screaming at the television when she chased after him, and like I was like, "Don't kiss, don't kiss, don't kiss."
I hate it. I hate it.
But the hug was okay, because like that goes back to like what Renzo, you were saying. You said something not in this episode, but maybe before, where like Christine is giving Spock empathy in a way that no Vulcan ever has, and it speaks to Spock differently.
It's also a permission structure for him too, right? Like, here's somebody that I can respect who is very smart, who does their job very well, yet they're emotional, or
Right.
yet they express their feelings. She says I should express my feelings too. Maybe I should try that every now and then.
Yeah. I have avoided spoilers for the next episode, but I do need to point out that this episode and the last episode are both bottle episodes, and Trek has always tried to save budget by doing these bottle episodes that only take place mostly on pre-existing sets. The shuttle, the ship design sets. They did a little bit of change for the last episode, but it all took place on the ship. And this one we get one scene of them in the ice, and then that's it. So I'm really hoping.
It was shot with a screen wall too.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And what I liked about that AR window is it gives me that like TOS gradient vibe from the just like, here's a rocky set with a orange to purple gradient, and we're gonna pretend this is another world.
I love that.
I
shit.
love that vibe. I don't even care if like you can look at it and go, oh, that's obviously fake. I love it. But I'm definitely hoping that the budget saved for 2 bottle episodes in a row gives us a whiz bang of a season finale next week. But no spoilers from me on that one.
Can't believe you managed to avoid it.
Well, I blocked those tags on Twitter, and that's basically it. I do have some trivia to follow up on. So I said at the beginning of the episode, the title of this episode is called All Those Who Wander, which is a quote from the Fellowship of the Ring about, and everybody likes to be like, not all those who wander are lost. But there's a second Lord of the Rings reference in this episode. A ship in this episode called the Peregrine lights off a beacon that inspires the mission.
Oh my god.
In the movie The Return of the King, a character named Peregrine sets off the beacon at Minas Tirith that sets the stage for the final battle against Sauron. Now that only happens in the movie, that does not happen in the books. Peregrine Took, also known as Pippin. So yeah, and Cal, obviously my Lord of the Rings obsessed husband, was the one who pointed that out to me, and I was just like, oh, well, I hope there's more Lord of the Rings references in this, but no, not really. except for somebody falling to their death at the end.
Oh, yeah,
that is a very Lord of the Rings shot, isn't it? Yeah, that is a very specific.
This is a very
shot.
Denethor kind of shot, isn't it?
I have, well, not even just Denethor, but Gollum.
Sure. Yeah.
So
carrying a great evil with him as he goes.
Yeah, there you go. So some beef. Big J's not here to give the beef, so I'm gonna give the beefs that I saw. It's a little beef. This is like a rare, medium rare beef. It's not really like well done beef. But it just seems like the Vidian power cells that they were transporting to Space Station K7 Tribbles. This is really weird technology. They decay en route. Why not just? I mean, if they're designed to last on a space station, why not just put them in a powered, cell and hand them over so they don't decay?
Maybe being in subspace is what causes their decay. So when you're moving them out, warp is as they decay.
Okay. All right, and that explains why they're on a station. But wouldn't you think the station would just import the parts to manufacture them?
Maybe it's dangerous, explosive. I don't know.
It's weird. I also don't like it.
I was
It's
very
weird,
much
but it's
like,
also it's one of those things like, oh, we can't do this, so we have to go. Oh my god.
that's just a
Sorry.
funky
My bad.
technology for those power cells.
It definitely does sound like one of those, like, we need to come up with a reason why the Enterprise is the only ship that can't be here.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same
It's
time,
weird.
that's also the trope. The Enterprise is always the only ship. There's even one where, like, you're the only ship in the quadrant. Like, wait.
Yeah.
Then we had this beef earlier that Mabenga reported no anomalies, but I'm like, there's a cavity that you can't scan. It's there. That's where the bad things are.
Yeah, no, it's actually ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. The only exception or the only justification I can think of for it is, so since the Gorn is made up of the material that it's in there eating, maybe it mimics the genetic material so that if you just look at the DNA of it, it looks like it's still human tissue. I don't know, man.
I guess I could see that, but you're still gonna get Gorn genetic. It's dumb.
Yeah, there's gotta be something
I don't
different.
like it.
No.
I thought it was dumb.
Yeah, but
at the same time, they're gonna have to scan the guy, and there's gonna have to be some scary thing that happens.
Yeah,
I get it, but
they've never
extension.
seen Buckley before. Yeah, they've never seen a Buckley before, so they don't know what his actual internal arrangement of words is supposed to be like.
I suppose.
I guess that's true. Okay, that might be the only excuse that I've got would be it's alien genetics they've never seen, and we don't know any anomalies because we can't find them because we've never. It's still dumb. I still don't like it.
Chapel actually said that, right? Like she was saying, let's compare him to a scan from a few minutes ago before Chia gets killed. Yeah. Right. So she was picking up on it. Like, okay, something's changed. Let's compare him what he looks like now to what he looked like 30 minutes ago or whatever.
Rip Ensign Chia, by the way. God damn it. I mean, you know they're gonna die, but god damn it.
2 of the 3 people who were commended at the beginning of this episode died.
The
and
2
Uhura's like, yeah, I'll stay.
characters died. Surprise.
Yeah. Well, you know what else? Hemmer's the first red shirt in Strange New Worlds to die.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, you should have seen that coming a mile away, but Einar can't see, so. The last beef that I have is more like functional protocol kind of a thing, but like if you've got 2 shuttles that are going down to a planet that has no communication, there absolutely needs to be some kind of tether to either each other, you leave one in orbit, or somehow to get a hard line to maintain communication with the outside. Why, Renzo?
Orbital tethers are really fucking scary.
Yes, they are.
So, you've seen Foundation, right?
I have not, because I don't have Apple blah, 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 blah.
Okay, so the idea of like an orbital skyhook, right? Like a line that you can hold from ground to space.
Yeah, I know. It travels like thousands of miles an hour on the surface.
Yeah, and if something happens to snap on it anywhere along the line, it's going to wrap around the surface of the planet a couple of times, destroying everything it fucking touches because of the speed with which it whips around. It's a real dangerous idea. Yeah. So I agree with you. They should have some means of communicating.
What about
just not a tether?
What about deploying communicative enhancement drones?
Yeah, something that hovers upper in the atmosphere, serves as like a midway point, and then you can communicate with like a drone in space or a probe.
Yeah,
I'm down.
Absolutely,
that's a good idea. We see something like that in the Orville actually in their first season. Like they're doing an away mission on a planet where they can't communicate out of, so they leave like log buoys and they update the log buoys. That's it. But they can't actually communicate away from this place. Something like that should be there in Trek.
Yeah,
I tend to agree. Yeah.
Yep. Well, that's my take on this episode. So much happened. I'm gonna miss Hemmer. Like, bring him back, go into the mirror universe, just do a recon mission. Hemmer.
How terrifying would mirror Hemmer be?
Bad. Scary.
I don't know. Mean. What if he's the exact same?
He probably
That'd be
uses
kind of
telepathy
funny
to fuck with you.
You know, that was something that didn't really pop up for me, and I don't know if they established it already, but like, are Einar prohibited from using their telepathy? As a weapon?
Enterprise. They talk about that in Enterprise as like a culture. They're pacifists and they believe in personal privacy, like absolutely.
Okay.
So they don't read unless like they're specifically given permission. Now, I think that probably using your mental abilities to defend yourself against like a wild animal is probably fine, but somehow they were immune to telepathy too, because of course.
Right. But that also explains Hemmer's line about "I will not be the one to kill the Gorn, but I will do what I must to save this crew."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, okay, that tracks. I feel better about it. I don't like it, but I feel better about it. Do you
got anything else, Susie?
I'm good.
Renzo?
I
think we covered it.
Yeah, I think we got all the big points.
Yeah. All right. So, do you have any takes about this episode that we didn't cover? Let us know in the comments. Hit us up on Twitter at BeyondTrekPod. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you are listening to us on Anchor. Check us out on YouTube. That way you can see our glorious reactions to all of the takes that we have here. And if you've made it this far, thank you for always going boldly with Beyond Trek Podcast. Hey everybody. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our Patreon and Anchor supporters. Big thanks to Stephanie Baker, S. Tam, Anne Marie, Jim Cook, and Nora Hickson. We really appreciate your support. Thanks for being a part of Beyond Trek Podcast.
We are Beyond Trek Podcast. Lower your inhibitions and surrender your ears. We will add inspirational and hilarious Trek content to your day. Your attention will adapt to subscribe to us. Resistance is futile.